Not all of the President CEOs Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts. Thank you for being part of the resistance.
You just watched footage from the April 5th nationwide hands-off protests against the Trump administration, and it's part of a growing grassroots movement that organizers say is just getting started. Joining me today is one of those organizers, attorney Joseph Bogen. Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, so before we get into what's going on this weekend and the actual movement, I want to go back to April 5th and the millions of people that we saw that came out to protest. Can you talk about how that movement began and what it was in direct reaction to?
Yeah, I mean, I can. I don't know how. It's hard to say. I mean, I think a lot of us, when Trump took office and when he was elected this time, I mean, I remember very vividly 2016 and 2017. And right afterwards, people were getting organized. The Women's March was essentially planned literally right after the election. But this time around, I think a lot of people were feeling defeated, deflated. Our leaders weren't really leading or doing anything. And it has become very clear this year that we need to do a lot of organizing, that this administration is not like the last one. It's actually much worse. And, it's been a new outrage every day. Myself and Indivisible, I started getting involved back in 2017, and it was sort of short-lived. We actually had right after the election, we had a meeting with all of our friends talking about what can we do to get more involved. And a lot of the things that we were discussing later turned up in the Indivisible guide that was originally just published as a Google document. And then we formed an Indivisible Dallas chapter. And what happened was it kind of fell apart. I had to take a step back from the leadership role and never had anyone really to fill a vacuum. We really never defined who the leadership was. And a lot of the Indivisible groups, there was one Indivisible group in Dallas I felt like wasn't really doing its job, and doing what Indivisible was supposed to be about, which is direct advocacy and organizing. And so this time around, after the election, I initially, my wife didn't want to get involved in politics or activism. I didn't really either, but you can't just sit by and watch government programs being gutted, federal employees being fired. I went to graduate school at the LBJ School of Public Policy. So a lot of these people are people that I know that are getting fired, or their coworkers are getting fired. And so it is kind of personal to me. And, it just sort of started organically. I reached out to some of the people that I knew from 2017 that I thought were smart and level-headed. And then Adriana, one of our organizers, she had sort of connected through the Indivisible website, and we just sort of happened to connect and, realized that we're, of like mind. And so we formed a new Indivisible Dallas chapter, and we're still figuring it out as we go. We're all new to this. None of us are professional activists. None of us, have ever had a paid position in politics or organizing. We're, like a lot of people, just angry and fed up. And so when Indivisible made the nationwide call for protests on April 5th, there was not a protest in Dallas. I sort of consider my biggest contribution to the April 5th protest in Dallas was just registering the event on the website. But there were other things that I did behind the scenes to help, connect people and facilitate speakers. But I'd never done this before. I've never organized a protest. I had a lot of help. There were a lot of other people involved. But to me, the big lesson from that experience, and I'm sorry if my answer is already going on way too long or going off topic, was that there's things that we can all do. Even if you've never organized before, even if you've never protested before, there is a role for all of us. There were things that I was able to contribute just by, being present and just doing my best. And that's really that's my message to people. And that's what I'm trying to encourage everyone to do, because this is this is going to take a lot of work to stop the damage and then to undo and fix the damage. And I think what we've seen in the last few months is the people who were supposed to stop this, who are really supposed to stand up to this, the institutions, law firms, lawyers, judges, Democrats in Congress, they're not doing it. No one's coming to save us. It's up to us.
You're an attorney, as I mentioned earlier. And so since the administration has taken over, we've seen the implementation of Project 2025 in varying degrees. For example, the attempt to dismantle the Department of Education. What are some moves the administration has made that you believe are either like pushing the law to the limit that we haven't seen before or just blowing right past it?
Yeah, I think we've already blown right past it. I mean, they abducted hundreds of people and deported them to a foreign prison to be tortured. And when judges have ordered them to return at least one of those individuals, they've just been thumbing their nose at it. I mean, this is really dark stuff. It is not an exaggeration to compare this to things, done in Nazi Germany or things done in other totalitarian regimes. These people were not U.S. citizens. Many of them were subject to deportation already. But we don't really know that. Some of them were deported accidentally. Some of them had lawful status. And all of them were put on a plane, deported without due process in violation of a court order. So if that can happen, there's nothing about what happened with those men that were sent to El Salvador that couldn't happen to a U.S. citizen. To me, that's the most terrifying thing, but also watching, major law firms bend the knee and offer, millions of dollars in pro bono services to undermine the United States Constitution. I don't have the vocabulary to really express how angry and frightening I find that.
When we were watching some of the law firms talk about how much they were going to give in pro bono work to the Trump administration, it got me to thinking about, the impact on the battle on the other side of that. Because if someone is finding themselves in the crosshairs of the administration and they're having to go up against that legally, let's say they go to a nonprofit group or an advocacy group that has attorneys on hand, they're battling these massive, powerful DC law firms that are saying that we're going to get $50 million in free service. Can you talk about the disparity in that and like how hard that battle is to overcome?
Yeah, I mean, it's a disparity that that exact situation I don't have personal knowledge of, but what it's like to deal with disparate resources is something I see all the time in our criminal justice system. There are countless people in jail and prison there are people who plead guilty all the time simply because they don't have resources. Resources are what matters. It is night and day when a lawyer has, a team of other lawyers, investigators, and the ability to spend as much time as needed on a matter versus a lawyer who's not being paid to do the work or doesn't have the time or has a massive caseload. So yeah, there are lots of nonprofits and good groups and public interest lawyers fighting the good fight, but when you're up against someone with unlimited resources, it can be very difficult. And we've seen with Elon Musk's, some of his frivolous defamation lawsuits, there have been organizations that have shut down simply not because they were on the wrong side of the law or Elon Musk had a, colorable legal claim, but they just didn't have the resources to go up against someone who could just spin them into the ground.
So speaking on Elon Musk and his involvement in Doge and the cutting of the federal workforce, in regards to the control he has over billions of dollars in federal contracts, the influence that he has, and there could potentially be that conflict of interest for things that his companies may go out for. Can you talk about your thoughts on that and why people should be concerned and paying attention to what's going on concerning him and the government contracts?
Yeah, I guess I'd push back on something you said. There's no potential conflict of interest. It is a conflict of interest.
Oh, sure, yes.
He is literally directing our money, our federal tax dollars into his pocket. He gets billions and billions of dollars of our money. And now he's literally gutting the FAA, firing air traffic controllers so that, he can hire or make people use, Starlink or his own things. He's been, I know he's apparently in the White House, they're using Starlink instead of other more secure internet systems. Yeah, it's not just I don't even think conflict of interest accurately describes what's happening. It's
Yeah,
just
it's a bit past that, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, it's theft. This is the kind of crap that I remember reading or seeing a 60 Minutes report about, Russia's transition from communism to capitalism and how corrupt it was. And I think that if we, if I was able to go back and rewatch that segment, it would look quaint. I would want something like that. I mean, there's no accountability. There's nothing. I mean, it's an oligarchy. The government is, I'm stumbling over my words because I don't think we have the vocabulary to really appropriately describe what's happening. It is just straight up theft, in my opinion. And not in my opinion, it's theft.
And possibly because it's something that we haven't seen to this degree before.
No, and it didn't start this year. This has been an ongoing problem and an ongoing failure. And that's why, this time around, I'm determined to keep being involved and keep organizing, because my big lesson from the last 10 years is we cannot count on people in authority or people in power to do their jobs and uphold the Constitution. We already crossed a terrible line and set a terrible precedent when Donald Trump was allowed to take office in 2017 and still hold on to his business interests and set up what he called a blind trust. There was no blind trust. And we saw his hotel in DC did gangbuster business from 2017 through 2020. But then once he was out of office, no one was, wanted to stay there anymore. What was that? We all know what it was. Foreign governments were bribing him. He set up a meme coin. He has all these ways for people to funnel money into his pockets. And then he's literally using our federal government, our tax dollars, to dispense favors to people who pay him off. It's infuriating and it's outrageous. And these people who wanted to complain about Hunter Biden or called it the Biden crime family. It's the hypocrisy is it's beyond hypocrisy. We are being looted by a criminal organization in the Donald Trump family and Elon Musk and his little neo-Nazi acolytes that has run amok through federal agencies.
You had mentioned the inaction of some of the Democratic leadership. Do you think that the way that they're handling it is more, are they trying to keep the status quo, even though it seems like, and what many would argue is that this is a different type of battle that's being fought right now. And so the old playbook is not going to work this time around. Do you think there's more sentiment that way, where they're trying to go up against this administration how they usually did? And are there people that you're seeing that are standing out, that are throwing out that old rule book that you have faith in? So
there's a few bright spots. Jasmine Crockett has been vocal, but I don't know. I truthfully don't know if, she's been good about getting in front of cameras and speaking out. I honestly don't know how she's doing in Washington. And I think that we need to be really holding people accountable. Are you doing everything in Congress to gum up the works and stop what's going on? But she has limited power. She's only in the U.S. Congress. She doesn't have as much power as a senator. And that's where we've really been let down. Marco Rubio apparently got confirmed unanimously. And he's, in my view, just as much of a neo-Nazi as J.D. Vance and Donald Trump. He was celebrating these illegal deportations. He belongs in prison as much as the rest of them. And every Democrat who voted to confirm him, I kind of feel like they should resign in disgrace. There's just no defending it. So yeah, I've been very disappointed. I think that, there are a few people. It's good that Chris Van Hollen went down to El Salvador to, meet with one of these wrongly deported men, but he shouldn't be the only one. They should all be going down to El Salvador. This should be, and there's a lot of cowardice. There's a lot of Democrats who think, well, let's not pick a battle over undocumented immigrants or people who aren't citizens. And to me, that's completely wrongheaded. You pick a battle over the U.S. Constitution. They're defying court orders. It doesn't matter if it's someone that we don't like or someone not from this country. We're a nation of immigrants. We're supposed to like it. We're a party that's supposed to welcome immigrants, and yet I mean, even before Donald Trump got elected again, we saw Democrats running away from this issue instead of speaking clearly about why immigration is a benefit and why people coming here to want to better their lives and better this country are not criminals. They're not a threat. They're not an invasion. What is going on? I think it's a mixture of a lot of things. I think you have a lot of people with, it's something I see in the legal profession. There are people, a lot of judges, when they first take the bench, they're very warm, they're very friendly, and they listen to you and they'll listen to arguments and really think through things. But when you're on the bench, when you're a judge, everyone calls you your honor. You're sitting above all the other lawyers on a regular basis. And I think it goes to people's heads. And I think that's the same with people in politics. A lot of these races, most political races are determined by things that are out of our control. What party is doing well that year? What's your district like? I mean, there's even some studies that show that, whether the home team wins or loses a game can sometimes affect how the incumbent does in an election. But everyone who works in politics, they think they got there because they're so smart and they're so clever. And that's not the case. These people got lucky. They're just like billionaires. Billionaires all think that they're rich because they're so smart. No one actually earns $1 billion. You get that rich because you were lucky, either through having some access to generational wealth like Elon Musk and Donald Trump, or sometimes you start a business and you just have great timing and things take off, like with Mark Zuckerberg. But luck plays a big role in acquiring wealth, and I think in political power. And none of them, there's never any self-reflection with people in these positions. And then, I think they're used to doing the same things and they think that it works. And, we all have our own biases and our own myopia. Like, they're not suffering. They're not seeing it. I mean, these are people making, I don't know. I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I think that the vast majority of members of Congress, even Democrats, are millionaires. It's a little hard to really understand what normal Americans are going through and how scared people are when you're going to be just fine. And I think that's also part of it. They're going to be okay. John Fetterman can keep getting all the health care he needs as a U.S. senator, but so he doesn't have to worry about it when he votes for a Republican budget that guts services for people who need it.
And speaking of just the masses and the people that are most affected, I have to mention that there are millions of people who they voted this way, and some of them say they're happy with what's going on. But we are starting to see nationwide at some of these town halls that there are cracks there, that people are telling in deep red districts, they're telling the elected officials, this is not what we voted for. How does that conversation go with someone who, if you were talking to someone who voted for Donald Trump, about why they should be concerned if they're not yet at that point yet to where they're starting to kind of fracture with what the administration is doing?
Yeah, so I'll be honest. I don't necessarily think this is my strong suit. I don't know. I mean, even though I spent a lot of my work life in red counties in front of Republican judges, I have not figured out the secret to convincing these people to switch their political leanings and vote Democrat. I do know one person that I work with who, she spoke to a neighbor who felt like she couldn't speak out, and she felt like, her husband votes one way and she can't really speak up. And part of it is you just have to connect with these people. These people are there. Some of them are just silent, feeling silenced and feel like they can't speak out. There are progressives, there are Democrats in Kaufman County and Van Zandt County and all these smaller counties. They just feel very alone and isolated. So I think really first we need to reach out to those people. There are people that, voted for Trump but didn't really know what he stood for. And that's a lot of people. That's another category that absolutely is reachable. And I don't necessarily know the answer. It's a big problem. I think that part of the problem comes down to media access and information literacy. There have been studies showing that Donald Trump won news desert counties by something like 50 points. And so what that tells you is that, people who aren't really able to get information and don't know what's going on, those are the people that broke for Donald Trump this time. And I think really the best way to persuade them and bring them along is we just have to be loud about what's going on. We can't count on the New York Times, CNN, the Dallas Morning News, local media to amplify these issues and really make them salient. I think it's really up to us at the grassroots level. And that's why, people sometimes feel like protesting doesn't get anything done, but it does bring visibility to these issues. And I think that's really the number one thing, because people aren't hearing about this stuff. They're not hearing about it, on the media that they consume, which tends to be non-traditional media. And even in traditional media, I mean, if you go back and look at the headlines about, what Trump's economic plans were, they were not accurately reporting and conveying the disaster that he was going to bring. I mean, he said a lot of things about tariffs, but it didn't get the coverage it deserved. And I think that's where it's really on us to just be louder and hold media institutions accountable, support independent media that actually does report on the news and what's happening, because there's people that we need to reach out to. And then I think also we need to be clear-eyed about the fact that there is a solid amount of the American public. There is, I would say, maybe a third, I would hope it's less than a third, who just outright like fascism. This country has a long history with racism, and I think that plays a lot into Donald Trump's success. And those people aren't going away. There are people, and there's lots of them with odious political views who feel empowered by this administration. And at some point, there are people that can be persuaded. There are people that are on the fence. And I think that there are more of us that like democracy and support the Constitution than there are like Elon Musk that want to turn us into a fascist state. But those people exist, and we can't just pretend they don't. They exist, and we just need to work harder than them and defeat them.
And I wanted to touch on this aspect. You were talking about visibility, and it got me thinking about, watching some of the protests. And in this particular round, Black America said that we are sitting this one out. There's social media on TikTok and different types of things that were saying that we're sitting out the protests, and that was due to the way that Black America voted overwhelmingly and some of the warnings that were given. So some of the criticisms that I'm seeing is that in this round of protests, we're not seeing the heavy police presence that we saw during the George Floyd protests. Some of the behavior, it's a very different vibe when you're not seeing a lot of Black America out there at protesting this time around. So I wanted to ask you, is that disparity something that organizers kind of see? And then what message does that send when there's a different reaction to widespread protests?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. We had millions of people taking to the streets on April 5th. I did not see a single news report about clashes with the police or any kind of violence. There were people in our group, there have been discussions about, security and people being worried. And one person, one of the organizers very bluntly said, I don't think we need to be that worried. Most of the people that show up and are going to show up are white. And that sounds terrible, but it's, I think, 100% true. And I don't know. I obviously don't have the answer to how we, resolve that, but I think it's something that we definitely need to be very aware of and conscious of, and also, try to reach out. It is a problem when, everyone at a protest, I don't know the answer to this, because on the one hand, white people are what got us into this mess. So I feel like we really have the duty to show up and do something about this. It's white people that elected Donald Trump. But I feel like we're not going to be successful this is going to take all of us. I really think that, I've seen the old Revolutionary War cartoon, not cartoon, but I don't know what you would call it, but the join or die with the snake divided up. And that really resonates with me, because we all need to join all the movements. Everyone is under attack. This administration is trying to erase Black history. They're trying to erase trans people. They're trying to, basically starve and kill the poor. They're trying to, subjugate women. They're, trying to, they're attacking all kinds of minorities. They're really trying to divide us up, and we really do need to be united. And yeah, I mean, it's great that the police weren't violent towards April 5th protesters, but I wish they would be like that all the time.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. What people were saying is that it was clear that the reaction from the police, even just on the outset and showing up in force, was very, very different than when we are out in masses protesting. And that kind of leads into what I was reading about. Is it the 5501 group? Can you talk about number one, what that number stands for? And also, I was reading that organizers say they want 3.5% of the population to participate, and citing that the number as the threshold for what they call sustained resistance. Can you break that down?
So I'm not super familiar with five. We co-organized the April 5th protest with them. And that's how I learned about 50501. So what it stands for, I think early on, they organized 50 protests in 50 state capitals in one day. So that's what it stands for: 50 protests, 50 state capitals, one day. And I'm not super familiar with that 3.5% statistic, but I have seen that. And I think the idea is, if we have 3% of the population, which, I mean, I'm going to just do some mental math here. I think the United States has 300 million people. And so if we had 3.5% of that out in the streets, that would be about 10 million people. And yeah, I guess there's been studies showing that that's what it would take to really, kick off a national movement and grind things to a halt. And that's what I hope we're building to. I really believe that that we're getting to the point where this country needs massive resistance, massive mobilization, not just a protest in downtown Dallas with a few thousand people on a Saturday, but I think we're getting to a point where we need to start camping out in front of federal buildings, in front of government offices. We need to be marching not just one day on the weekend, but every day, because they're not going to stop. I mean, this is a fascist movement with a vision of how this country should be governed and how people should live their lives that is drastically out of step with the vast majority of Americans. And they are determined. They know they're outnumbered. So they're going to use every, lever of power they can to, force their agenda on the rest of us. And what we've seen a lot of, it's going to get worse. The military leadership's been gutted in favor of loyalists. We have Pete Hegseth as the Defense Department secretary, he's the one who convinced Donald Trump to pardon a murderer and a war criminal. And I think that both of them would love nothing more than to see U.S. troops firing on U.S. citizens. And the way we prevent that is we need to have enough people showing up so that no one would ever think of firing into a crowd. It can't just be, a few protesters at a college campus. We need massive resistance that brings people from all walks of life in, so that this isn't just, something where someone can say, well, it's just those radicals over there. This is all of us, and it does affect all of us.
And I think with that statement, we will wrap up there. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I want to hear from all of you. What are your thoughts about the hands-off movement? What are your major concerns with what's going on with this current administration? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you like this kind of content, news, politics, and current trends, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.